Republican Senator Tim Scott appeared on CNN's State of the Union with Dana Bash to follow up on the fact that he endorsed Donald Trump. Now, as a reminder, Tim Scott is a senator from South Carolina. He ran for president in the GOP primary this cycle, didn't get much traction, dropped out, and endorsed Trump. And I talked about in a previous segment regarding Ted Cruz, the fact that Trump's existence in American politics has exposed and emphasized the cowardice and low character of so many of these Republican politicians. And that is on full display in this CNN interview. It's going to be really aggravating, so get ready, but just really try to grasp and absorb the ridiculousness of Tim Scott's answers to Dana Bash's questions. And before playing the first clip, I have to show you this one for context from Tim Scott's endorsement speech of Trump.
We need a president today who will stop the crime and recklessness in the streets. We need a president who will restore law and order. We need Donald Trump. Oh.
So the guy with 91 felony counts against him is going to restore law and order. Makes sense. Then here's Dana Bash asking him about that moment.
You did say on Friday, Senator, is that when you endorsed Donald Trump, is that he will, quote, restore law and order, which is some of what you're talking about here this morning. As president, yes. He did try to overturn a legitimate election. He called January 6 rioters hostages and promised to pardon them. He is charged with keeping classified documents and obstructing attempts to get them back. And on the campaign now, he's arguing that presidents should have total immunity, even if they, quote, cross the line. How is that law and order?
Well, he has a legal team that can answer the questions of the legal challenges that he faces. But what I can tell you is that when you look around the cities, when you grow up in poor communities like I did, and you watch the crime ravishing your communities, you ask yourself, what president has allowed that to happen? It's Joe Biden. When you have DAs around the country that says it's no longer a crime to steal $1,000 worth of goods, and those stores start closing in San Francisco and across the country, you ask yourself, what president allowed that lawless behavior to continue? That's Joe Biden. You ask yourself, who can restore the kind of law and order in our nation to allow it to go forward? That would be Donald Trump.
Okay, I'm going to jump in and respond. Then I'll play more where Dana Bash brutally but perfectly follows up with, so you're okay with the January 6 rioters being called hostages by Trump, the guy you're endorsing? But before playing that, Tim Scott brought up crime under Joe Biden and how I guess Biden in his mind is to blame for issues with crime in the United States. And I'm so excited to go through what I'm about to go through because it flies right in the face of everything he and many other Republicans have been saying. So crime spiked in the United States starting in 2020. 2020. Tim, who was president in 2020? Trump. Now, I'll be honest, unlike Tim and many others, and say that had a lot to do, that crime spike, with the pandemic. But specifically in regard to murder, NPR reports that FBI data shows an unprecedented spike in murders nationwide in 2020, and the murder rate in 2020 was 40% higher in red states won by Trump than the blue states won by Biden. Very interesting. Again, Trump was president in 2020, but because it was obviously pandemic related that crime was spiking, that surge continued into the Biden presidency, as you can see in this visual. And then something incredible happened. Crime started to drop under Joe Biden so fast, so rapidly, the experts are fainting all over the place trying to understand it. Maybe not that, but they're really amazed by what they're seeing. Dropped all the way to pre-pandemic levels, and in some places to 50-year lows. And I'll break down those numbers after watching the second half of this clip.
Senator, I understand that you're talking about Joe Biden, but I do want to get your thoughts in a more fulsome way on Donald Trump, because your endorsement was a big deal and is a big deal. I just want to take one of the examples that I gave. Donald Trump calls the January 6 rioters hostages. You were at the Capitol that day. You said that you took off your jacket, you rolled up your sleeves, and you were prepared to defend yourself, quote, presumably until I died. Would you call the people who
Yes.
are now facing prosecution hostages?
I would say that every single person facing our justice system should have justice done. The facts and the evidence in each individual case matters. I have confidence that that process will play out.
Thanks for the question, Dana. Here's what I have to say. Justice is about being just. So I think that the just outcome for those who created outcomes that weren't ideal should see the ideal ending to the story of their interactions with law enforcement and become members of a society founded on liberty, freedom, and justice and flags and eagles. And that's what Donald Trump stands for. What was that? Trump's calling them hostages. So the question is, Tim, do you agree or not? It makes me, even though I'm laughing at it, so mad if I think about it too long. The non-answers that are given by people so often in politics, there very prominently, Tim Scott. That was nothing. He's just said a bunch of words that meant nothing. Now let's talk about the drop in crime under Dark Brandon, Joe Biden, that we've seen. ABC News reports, with 2023 ticking down, the nation is poised to finish the year with its biggest annual drop in homicides on record, according to preliminary data from law enforcement agencies, both large and small. Monaco said the federal government has played the role of force multiplier in helping local law enforcement drive down the nation's murder rate by identifying and removing the most prolific shooters and violent offenders from the streets. NBC News reports violent crime dropped 8%, while property crime fell 6.3% to what would be its lowest level since 1961, according to criminologist Jeff Asher, who analyzed the FBI numbers. The most recent annual report released in October covered 94% of the country and found that violent crime in 2022 fell back to pre-pandemic levels, with murder dropping 6.1%. Then, super interestingly, Detroit is on pace to have the fewest murders since 1966. Asher found, while Baltimore and St. Louis are on track to post the fewest murders in each city in nearly a decade. Then back to ABC News. One more thing. The drop in homicide comes as more than 3/4 of Americans say there's more crime in the U.S. than a year ago, and more than half of Americans say the same about crime in their local area, according to a Gallup poll released last month. So it's almost like playing videos on loop on networks like Fox News of crimes taking place with a banner title that says Joe Biden's America or something can convince people that something's happening that's not. Now, I do always have to include the caveat. This doesn't mean you don't have very real and horrible experiences with crime. If you do, those are real and need to be addressed. The point is that we're making progress. Joe Biden came into office during a crisis where, because of conditions caused by the pandemic, inflation was spiking, crime was spiking, unemployment was high, and now just 3 years later, inflation back down, crime back down, unemployment has been lower for longer than we've seen in decades. That record matters. And even though mainstream media seems to be allergic to giving Biden credit, I think we should. If right-wing media is going to blame Joe Biden every time they stub their toe, I think we should give him credit when things get a lot better. Even though the causes of crime are so much more complicated than the president, obviously. But the recovery that Biden oversaw, that many of his policies did contribute to significantly, had to be a big variable in all of this. So Tim Scott's just living in an alternate universe for his political gain. And here's another moment from the interview just to make you suffer through a little bit more of the non-answers.
Senator, Donald Trump is launching some pretty personal attacks against Nikki Haley, who I know you've known for a very long time. He suggested she isn't eligible to be president, even though she is. She was born in your home state of South Carolina. He repeatedly mocked her given first name, Nimarata, even though she has gone by her middle name, Nikki, her whole life. Are you comfortable with that kind of rhetoric from the president? The former president?
Well, I'm watching rhetoric on all sides of the issues facing becoming president. What I mean by that is the rhetoric from Joe Biden is terrible, but it's salacious. Nikki Haley questions whether 70-year-olds should be allowed to run for president. I think there is so much negativity and toxicity in this aim to becoming president again or for the first time.
That's just remarkable. There's so much toxicity. So let's fix that by picking Trump. Also, he said, quote, "Well, I'm watching rhetoric on all sides of the issues." Are you now? So in other words, you just used 10 words to convey absolutely nothing to us. And then many more words after that to do the same. Thank you for wasting our time, Tim Scott. I saw a former Republican Congressman, Joe Walsh, say on X, "Of all my former congressional colleagues, perhaps this one makes me the most sad because Tim is a decent guy who knows exactly how unfit Trump is, because Tim doesn't believe one word he's saying about Trump right here. Not one word, just so sad." Yeah, as I said with Ted Cruz and others, if history takes note of Tim Scott, it's going to be for this. His shameful decision to put his integrity, character, and love of country up into flames to serve the dear leader, Donald Trump, who's openly running, again, on an anti-democratic and dangerous platform for a second term, and who tried to block the peaceful transfer of power last time. He showed us what he's willing to do. And on that note, Ben Meiselas of the Midas Touch Network wrote this on X. So I just want to make sure I got my facts right here. You got a guy who attacks our allies, was found to be a rapist by a federal jury, praises our enemies, led an insurrection that we all saw occur, told us a pandemic would disappear like a miracle and to inject bleach into our arms, added $8 trillion in debt, ran almost every company he led into bankruptcy before he held office, is on tape bragging about molesting women, was pals with Epstein, met his third wife at the Kit Kat Club, brags about taking cognitive exams frequently, spread 9/11 conspiracies, posted over 600 QAnon memes in the past 18 months, and so on and so on. And the media just treats this like this is normal. Yeah, and mainstream media needs to snap out of it and treat Trump like the threat to democracy that he is. Make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel. You can become a member at lukebeasley.com/membership. And if you're a podcast listener, rate and review wherever you are listening.